Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Call Me Crazy. Today we have on Sean Sheppard, who's actually a 5-time founder with over 20 years of experience bringing new products to the market. Most recently, he's the founder of GrowthX, which helps companies scale. He's up in the Bay Area. Sean, welcome. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like weird timing too, because for us, we're in the stage with Dope Dog where we're growing, and it's always exciting to talk to somebody that, you know, has started multiple companies and is growing. And that's like, it's so hard when you think about growing because there's so many different ways to do it. But I just want to know, like, let's start at the beginning with you. Like, where did it all begin? What was your first company you founded?
Oh God, I was an arms dealer as a child. I'm not kidding. I was obsessed with Bruce Lee movies.
Okay.
And Taekwondo and martial arts and getting dressed up like a ninja and all that stuff. And I would buy, I'm aging myself here. I am 47. So this is the early 1980s. I would buy these Chinese throwing stars and nunchucks and things out of the back of Black Belt magazine. And it was at a time when you really would literally fill out a piece of paper and you would check a box that says, yes, I am 18 years or older.
Of course.
And then you would literally put cash in the envelope. And then in 6 to 12 weeks, you would get your merchandise. And so I get it. And then all my friends were jealous because I made money mowing lawns and doing yard work and doing all sorts of stuff. That's just who I always was. I was always trying to figure out a way to earn a living. There were things that I wanted to do. And to me, freedom is economic freedom. And that's the path. So, so I'd have all these things and people were like, these are so cool. I want to buy them from you. And I'm like, oh, they're not for sale. They said, well, I'll give you $5. And I paid 75 cents for it. And I said, ooh, interesting. So I literally started to take all that money and reinvest it and buying more and more and more. And before you know it, I was literally selling them at school.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Can you imagine doing that today? I mean, it'd make national news. I'd be, that kid would be thrown in prison.
Yeah, it might be illegal. I mean,
in today's helicopter environment, it would have been it just mad. But honestly, that's how it started. I made enough money to take my family to Disneyland an extra day that summer, and I thought that was really cool.
That's great.
And once you get a taste of it, you see the money. You're like, oh, I'm making $4 on each thing. I'm not doing much. Like, then you're
funny?
Hooked.
I remember in, like, I don't know, in elementary school when they used to do the CDs for like 99 cents, where I would get the little pamphlet and you could get all the CDs in the mail for,
Columbia Records.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember all that. I remember how fun it was. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, stuff coming to, now it's just Amazon, basically. You just click and ship. But the good old days, you could just fill out stuff, send money to somebody, and hopefully you get it back.
Yes, I am 18 years of age or older.
Of course.
Absolutely.
All right. So then let's fast forward to today. You are founding partner of GrowthX. Do you want to tell everybody just a little bit about that?
Sure. Myself and my partners got together and started it about 6-7 years ago. We were all serial entrepreneurs turned investors, turned frustrated investors because our companies weren't growing. And the reason they weren't growing, that we learned, was that they weren't developing their markets and making money. They had no problem developing products and raising money.
Sure.
But they had a real problem developing their markets and making it. So we started to look around and try and solve our own problem first, which is often what happens when people build good companies. They identify a real problem, often one they feel themselves, and they just really spend enough time on the problem to figure out a way to solve it. And for us, it was, how do we help our companies find what we now know today to be called product market fit, which is the definition basically is that when there's more demand for that than you have the ability to fulfill, or when the market is starting to pull you in a direction as opposed to you pushing hard against it, that's when product market fit happens. And then you can build something that's lasting and sustainable, hopefully. And then as we looked around, we saw that, so I built a program and a methodology and a framework called Market Development Framework, known as MXP, Market Acceleration Program, that was designed to help companies find product market fit. And it was very practical and stage relevant. And it's all designed to do a very specific thing, and that is help a company find the truth about where its product fits in the market, what to do about it, how to create a functional learning team out of the people responsible for pursuing that truth, knowing they have limited time, money, and resources to do it. And then, can you find a business model that's predictable and profitable and hopefully scalable if you want it to scale? And in being a venture capitalist, I think about scale,
For sure.
but it doesn't mean that doesn't have to be everybody's definition of success. I know up in the Valley, people say lifestyle business. They say it in a very condescending and derogatory way, and it irritates the crap out of me. Yeah, you have, haven't you? All you have to do is talk to most of these people, and you'll notice it. But to me, if you can do well for yourself and your family and your community, then you're a success.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. So the scale part, that aside, it's about truth, learning, and profitability. And if you can find those three things, then you could build something that's successful on your own terms. And so we started to apply it. It worked really well. Then we looked outside of us, and others came looking at us and said, your failure rates are really low, your scale rates are really high. What are you doing differently? We explained it, and then next thing you know, everybody wanted a piece of it. So we started to license it to governments and companies and accelerators and incubators and educators around the world who just want to reduce the failure rates and improve the scale rates of entrepreneurs.
And is the MXP method, is that sort of, is that like a testing ground almost? It's almost like, here's an idea, let's figure out how to execute and make sure this is actual scalable business?
Yes, you can run any idea, product, service through it. The idea is that it's fundamental to the objectives that I just laid out. And so it doesn't have to be business to business or business consumer or marketplace or technology or widget or service.
Yeah.
It's all about taking something someplace new, whether that's a new thing to an existing place, an existing thing to a new place, or a new thing to a new place. And the way I tell the story is that there's a very different approach and methodology required when you are a stranger in a strange place with a strange offering, talking to other strangers and asking them to do strange things with you.
Yeah.
Than if it's a familiar thing in a familiar place with familiar people and familiar products and services, right? And so that's where most of the failure happens, is people don't recognize that A, they have limited time, money, and resources. B, they shouldn't be selling right now. They should be recruiting really partners that buy into their vision and understand their reality and are willing to take a risk to go down that path with you. And then have a structured approach towards learning together if we can create mutual value and benefit, and then how to monetize that. And that's a very focused, specific practice that most people, not understanding it, view as an art, when really it's a science if you actually dig into it. Because I think most art is science when it's actually understood.
Yeah.
And so I just took a scientific approach towards answering all the questions that I had been answering myself as a 5-time founder for 25 years, who's really not even a technologist. I can't even spell HTML. But I know what technology does to make the world a better place. I think it's cool and fun, and the promise of it is very exciting, which is why I've spent my career in it. And having grown up here in the Valley and a brat of the industry, but that's the approach, and that's how it works, and it tends to work quite well.
This might sound silly, but I was gonna could you give an example, like a brief example of say we're gonna sell like a newfangled hot dog or something, this is the greatest new hot dog made out of flowers. What would the process be going from, point A to Z and kind of and making sure this is a sellable product? What are just a brief overview, I guess, of? Sure.
Well, the MXP is a milestone driven methodology. It has 3 key milestones: market foundation and discovery, market messaging and outreach, and market results. And in foundation and discovery, each milestone is structured in a very important way, and it's for a reason, which is you have a milestone. Under the milestone, you have a phase. Within that phase, you have a goal, focus, and outcomes. And if you follow those in the appropriate order, the truth reveals itself, because it's about asking the right questions in the right order in the most efficient way possible. It's not like I created anything new. I just rearranged a bunch of shit and made it efficient, knowing that we don't have a lot of time, money, and resources to find out if we have product market fit. So step one is resource review. What resources do you have to execute on this idea? And what role and function and do they play relative to the product side of your business and the market side of your business? And is it money? Is it skills? Is it expertise?
Mm-hmm.
How's it being allocated? So you build a talent roadmap to create and support that functional learning effort that I talked about. That's the goal. And then the focus areas of doing that is you literally do that resource review, mapping, and planning. You do the current account review, mapping, and planning. In other words, who have you talked to about this idea already, and what have they told you? And how did you find them, and how did you get them? And do you even have anybody who's paying or not paying? Do you have customers yet? And then how are you tracking and instrumentation so that you can track all the activity? So that's resource reviews. That happens pretty quickly depending on the size of the company. Once you've done that, then you go into the most important part, which is market discovery, which is who's your Mr. Right now, not your Mr. Right.
Mm.
Who's the best early customer to work with? Because it's not just some demographic of a person, a place, or a thing, but it's the psychology as well. You need innovative and early adopter mindsets that will be willing, as I said, to buy into your vision, respect your reality, and walk that journey with you, and be willing to take the risks associated with that. They also have to have the not just the willingness to do that, but they have to have the ability. Do they have the resources to be an equal partner in this effort? And can we learn quickly and rapidly? Because if you go alone, you go fast, right? And you only need a few people in that initial cohort to learn from. What's that statistically significant initial customer profile that you're looking for? And then from there, you start to understand how your resources get allocated towards finding, attracting, and working with those people. And then at the end of that first milestone, you do this thing we call a market milestone. We all have product milestones, right? Like we know when we're going to do a new release of a version of a product, but we don't have market milestones. What's the objective for us to find that early customer, work with them? How do we define success over what period of time, and what does a win look like? Mm-hmm. And then you build a funnel. To me, everything's a funnel. I learned that in college. You start at the bottom of the funnel with the number of wins, and then you reverse engineer your opportunities to qualified conversations to initial outreach. And you say, look, I need 3 early customers to test my hot dog.
Yeah.
Right. Who are they? Where are they? What do they look like? What does the scope of that test look like? What do we hope to learn from it? And then if we all win together, what does our future together look like? And so if you need 3, you say, okay, well, for every 1 I talk to, I'm going to get, or for every 4 I talk to, I'm going to get 1 to say yes. So that means you need 12 opportunities. And for every qualified opportunity, I need to talk to another 4. That means you need 48 qualified conversations. Mm-hmm. And only 1 in 10 people I call are ever going to talk to me. So that means I need 480 people to reach out to. And so now you've got a funnel. Now you know exactly what you have to do. And then you have to ask yourself, do I have the resources to actually do that? Can this team of 2 people have 480 conversations in the next 3 months that turn into 48 qualified opportunities that turn into 3 customers, or whatever the number is, right? And that's milestone 1. And now out of that, you have this idea of what resources I have to execute, what my milestone is, and who my best early customer is, and how I'm going to find them. Then milestone 2 is market messaging and outreach. So that's how do you talk to these people in a way that gets them to tell you the truth? Yeah. Because you're looking for 2 things when you're taking anything to market. You're looking for someone or something's time and their truth. That's what you're asking for. You're not asking for money. The money comes later. It's all about give me your time and tell me the truth. And we live in a world now where it's never been more difficult to get people to tell you the truth. Yeah. And people don't want to tell you the truth if it creates more work or conflict. So you have to create a messaging strategy that's designed to make it really easy and safe for them to tell you the truth and give you their time. And that's very different, once again, than traditional messaging exercises, right? Familiar thing to familiar place, that's a different message than stranger in a strange land with a strange thing.
Yeah.
So you take that approach, and then once you do that, then you actually build a market message map and value propositions that are tied very specifically to one value hypothesis that says, because I've done my research on you, Mr. or Mrs. Right Now, I think I can help you in these ways, and I'd like to know if that's true. Can we have that conversation? And now you have a very pointed and focused discussion, and you build a conversation framework that looks for fit. Not trying to sell, as I said, you're trying to recruit right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for a really good partner, right? This is more eHarmony than Tinder.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're really, I'm serious. That's what you're looking for. And then out of that conversation message that you create, you can then reach out to those people. But before you do, you have to instrument. So now you have a way to track all the activity in and out, so you know what's working, and you can run rapid A/B tests and experiments left and right across every method and means.
Are you guys working with mostly ideas, or working with companies that are, already selling out there and trying to help them figure out where they're going wrong?
Well, it depends, and that's the adult diaper question, right? It depends.
Yeah.
With our fund and our fund thesis, we invest in B2B SaaS enterprise technology companies with highly scalable ideas and $10 billion service addressable markets with early customers and early revenue, typically doing somewhere around $500,000 to $1 million a year already in that early revenue. So there's an indication that they've got a big scalable business. But it doesn't mean you can't apply the framework to a stinking idea in your own bedroom.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask too. Like, does the model work better for some versus others? But it sounds like it could work for a lot of people.
Well, it works better for those who are learn-it-alls and not know-it-alls. So let's start with that, because the idea is that it is a learning framework, and it is a human-to-human learning framework. It's H to H. As I said, it's not B2B or B2C or marketplace or widget. It's H to H. The whole idea is about humans learning from other humans, what problem they have and how and whether or not they can solve it, and then what the value of that is.
And how do you weed out, like, the people, like you said earlier, that are not telling the truth? How do you make sure that these other humans aren't lying to you?
Well,
I don't know.
I mean,
That would scare me, right? Like, if
Well, again, this has to do with your messaging and your profiling. So you create a set of criteria that weeds those people out. I mean, you literally want to go out to these people and say, you do not want to work with me because it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. This is what I'm trying to accomplish, and this is what I think it will do for you. And you have to be willing to be a willing member of that exercise. And if I start to see behaviors that don't follow your words, then that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that you need to be honest about it. It's not very much different, like I said, than dating and in marriage. You've got to have a shared value system.
Yeah.
If you don't have a shared value system, everything breaks apart because shit sucks. Life sucks. Relationships suck. Everything sucks. It's just a degree of suck, right? And you got to embrace the suck, right? And so you need to have a grounded foundation and gain mutual agreement on what you're both trying to accomplish long term, and work towards that. But the minute you start to see those behaviors, in investment world, we call those pre-check and post-check behaviors. Like the way somebody behaves when they want your money is very different than after they get your money, or can be. So we care more about people that care more about our health than our money. And we actually have a reverse paywall in our investment portfolio. You don't get our help until we write a check for you. Because we want to see how you behave. But that said, to your point, it doesn't matter. You can apply this framework to anything of any size, any shape, any nature, because it's about that dynamic of taking something someplace new. And that's it. It's fundamentally designed that way.
That sounds great.
It sounds really valuable.
So go ahead.
No.
Go. What were you going to ask?
No, I was saying you have your GrowthX, which is your fund, and then you also have the platform and the program. Is that accessible for small businesses, or do they have to be, a strategic partner?
Oh, no, no, they can go. We've open sourced the majority of the content. There's 30 articles for every step and stage of the 3 milestones with all the tools and resources at growthx.com.
Cool.
#GXMXP series. And
Okay.
they can go read about it. And of course, they can go Google me and watch all the talks and all that stuff. Eventually, one day, I'd like to build a very simple piece of software as a free tool, collaboration tool that allows people to manage their way through this methodology on their own. And then from that, create other opportunities. Because another part of our business is we have GrowthX Studios, which works with funded companies to find product market fit and scale. We have GrowthX Corporate, which works with corporates to help them commercialize new innovations, invest in startup ecosystems. And we have GrowthX Academy, which is a place for people to learn all the necessary skills to work in high-tech startups, like growth marketing and growth hacking, UX design thinking, data science, entrepreneurial selling, the core MXP framework. Because eventually I'd like this to be an ecosystem as a service that can go into any market, like yours in LA or ours up here in the Bay Area, and catalyze and support entrepreneurship where they are. We already have licensing franchise partners in Malaysia and Korea and 5 provinces in Canada, and that's all been organic. And eventually I'd like to, for lack of a better term, globally franchise it so that every market has an entrepreneurial support system that is, actually meaningful. It has what it never had, which is teaching people how to get customers, keep them, and grow them. Because nothing happens until you sell something.
Well, and that's the hardest part too. It's like, so where we are in our business, we've been around now for 2.5 years, Dope Dog, and our problem is growth. And that's why we were excited to talk to you today, because it's a weird place, especially for us. I mean, this is very specific to like the CBD world. There is no paid advertising available for CBD companies. Any CBD company out there, if they are doing it, they're doing it like through back channels or paying, maybe ad networks to be just stagnant ads on websites, but there's no like Facebook, Instagram, anything like that. So it's just interesting to hear, because is a lot of the growth that you're saying, is it based off advertising, or is it just based off, there's actually a way you can do this, by going to, farmers markets, or going to, online communities and trying to sell yourself there? Is most of your strategy paid through social networks, or is it more of a internal kind of growth?
No, it's earned. To me, especially at the stage of when you're trying to find product market fit and grow, advertising should have a very strategic purpose to it, which is to attract more learning opportunities. The earned media is what is the most valuable. It creates the quote unquote organic inbound opportunities that you're looking for, and that comes from you giving more than you take. And that means content. That means trying to change the way people think about whatever it is that you do. The best content shows people things they've never seen, tells people things they've never heard, and gets them to think in ways they've never thought. And the responsibility to create a lasting, high quality brand presence is through that content creation and distribution. So advertising to me is more something that becomes a maintenance and or transactional growth channel. It's the organic stuff, the content creation. It's what you build and push out that can drive people's thoughts and actions in a certain direction. That's going to be the lasting thing. The challenge is that so many of us, when we're starting, are very impatient. We create false expectations. We never meet them. And then we suffer from F equals E minus R, which is my formula: frustration equals expectations minus results. And then we give up. And the thing about content creation and earned media is it's long form, it's long tail, and it has a longer return on the investment. And so people lose their patience around it. But it's the highest value approach. And 90% of the competition in any market doesn't do it, and certainly doesn't do it well. So it's not hard to separate yourself. You just have to do the work.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part too, because I think in a way, we are doing a lot of the correct things, and we're also in the process of fundraising too. So we're out there, we're talking to investors, and it's one guy says, oh, this is great, another guy says like, oh, maybe we'll do this or do that, and you get all these different inputs, and sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
confuses your path along the way because you feel like you're doing a really good job, and then maybe one person says you're doing a good job, but then like five others say like, maybe not, but maybe you should do this. Or does that make sense? Like, we're in the both.
Yeah, and we felt, the last couple of weeks of these conversations, it's been challenging because we were all organic. We weren't, thinking about these ads because we couldn't, and we found our own niche.
And we
But
do a lot of content. We
and we
do
do a lot of
tons and
content.
tons of blogs, SEO, videos, Instagram, stuff like that. So
But when the chatter comes through and everyone's like, you got to do the ads, you got to figure out this, and
Yeah.
you can get distracted, and it's really hard as an entrepreneur to like, put your head down and keep focus even when you have other priorities. And
do you have any funny like fail stories of somebody trying to have an idea and it just didn't work in your model? You're like, oh, that hot dog didn't sell because no one wants new hot dogs.
Well, a lot of things don't work. Look, 50% of successful funded startups pivot at
That's
least
true.
once. A third pivot at least twice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole host of different examples, and that's not the point, right? The point is that if you're a true learn-it-all, you recognize that the value of what you don't know is greater than the value of what you do know, and that your objective is to share your worldview and say, here, I made this, what do you think? Can it be helpful to you?
Yeah.
And the confusion I suspect that you're getting on the investor conversation side is the same you would get on the market side for your customers, because you can apply the MXP methodology to identifying your ideal initial investor profile the same way that you can identify your ideal initial customer profile. You apply the framework the same way, and you will find the right investors to talk to in the right way and have the right conversations so that you can actually get real meaningful feedback from it. There's something to take from all of those experiences, certainly, but apply the Feynman technique to your learning. If you're not familiar with Richard Feynman's instructional technique, Feynman. And we use it at the Academy as part of the pedagogy, which is, okay, you learn something, you do your key takeaways analysis, you identify the gaps that exist in your understanding, and then you try and articulate and teach it back. And only when you can teach it will you start to truly begin to understand it.
This is what I was reading in Jim Quick's book. I'm reading Jim Quick's book, Limitless, and he was just actually talking about this, about teaching, actually
to really knowing,
to really understand it. Yeah.
Correct. And that's absolutely true. But what you're feeling right now, that confusion, that's all part of the process.
For sure.
People think the learning curve in life is like the J curve in a startup. It's not. It's a sine wave of just a roller coaster of shit and giggles and piss and vinegar and frustration and angst and ambition and hope and failure and failure and failure.
All together, yeah.
But it's only failure if you don't learn from it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a constant moving thing. And I have my own way of growing through those things. And, sports for me were always my outlet and still continue to be. I played professional golf for a little while. I played in college and before I got into tech, and I played team sports of all kinds, everything, constantly. And there's a physical development and mental and emotional development process that you go through when you're trying to acquire a skill.
For sure.
And for me, it was always, it's a very visceral process in athletics. And I'm going through a major swing change right now in my golf game because I want to start playing better again, because my kids were about empty nesters and I'm going to start playing more. And my wife has encouraged me to do it, because she knows how happy it makes me and how it provides this great diversion from my work life, which is all consuming. And so I went and saw my coach, who's this amazing guy, and I hadn't seen him in 6 years. I spent 3 days with him, And by the end of the third day, I was playing better than I'd played in a decade, if not longer. I actually started to feel like, oh my God, now I remember why I used to make money doing this. This is pretty amazing. And then I come home and I take a week off and I hadn't gotten out, and then it just shit the bed. And I was out with some friends playing, and I was behaving like a bratty child. And of course, you know, they wouldn't be my friends if they didn't give me a massive amount of shit for my behavior.
Yeah.
And then continue to do so via text and group message for days on end afterwards. And I finally said, guys, I'm sorry. I appreciate you being patient with me, but this is how I learn and grow. It's not pretty, but I promise you I will be better for it. I'm sorry you had to see it.
Yeah.
But that's how I do it. Like, I know who I am. And if I'm really, really, really intently trying to learn something, that's the kind of experience that I get. So when you're doing this, when you're talking to investors or when you're talking to customers in your market, those opportunities create themselves. What you need is just that framework for processing that unstructured data, turning it into structured data, and then making that actionable insights that are meaningful. And that's the part where people have a hard time. 8 of the top 10 reasons startups fail have to do with behaviors of the founding team and markets, not the product or the technology or the service that they're building. And those behaviors that I just described are perfect examples. Like, how do you handle that? Yeah. What do you do with that?
And it's tough too, because you're in it day to day. And I think having those routines of like stepping away and trying to just like mentally relax for a few, you know, if it's an hour going on a run or going to play golf, or like, I like to go play some, you know, Call of Duty for an hour or so and just zone out, and I'm in a different world. But I think that helps me. And like, Aaron's been cooking, and, you know, we live together, so it's work, it's life. And I know we were talking before the podcast. How do you deal, because you're also working with your wife, right?
Yeah.
How does that dynamic work?
Well, it's hard.
Tips for us, I guess. That's what I'm asking. help us out here.
We're just engaged, so you know.
Oh,
we can still get out.
Yeah. So, well, we just, I think I was mentioning, we just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary on Tuesday, and I'm still hungover.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But, you know, the first thing is always a shared value system. So if you believe in the same things and want the same things in your life, the big things, you know, whether that's, you know, whether it's financial or it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's familial, right? Whatever it might be, you know, you need to get clear on those things together. And this is the same couples counseling I would give to startup founders as teams, because that's one of the big reasons they fail too, is they don't get along. And co-founders tend to do better than solo founders. Mm-hmm. And so you got to have that shared value system, number one. And then number two, you need to know, you got to communicate, no matter how hard it is, whatever form that takes. You know, I made the joke before we came on that communication's been the secret. And really what that means is that she corners me and forces me to behave like a normal human and express things when I'm in that learning and growing mode I was just talking to you about. Yeah. Where I tend to shut down and go into my turtle shell and then come out later in some other time and place and way. And then there also has to be a genuine respect and trust of the roles that you have in that working relationship, and be okay with those roles. But at the center of all of it, like, trust is the operating system for every great relationship, whether that's a marriage or it's a partnership in another way. You've got to have that trust for each other, and you've got to have each other's backs. And if you don't have that, everything else will eventually break down. And that's the core thing. It doesn't, like I said, it still doesn't make it easy. Well, we have our challenges regularly. She's in and out of the businesses on a regular basis. Her career is to chase new careers. She's going to be so pissed that I said that. But she's a brilliant woman, and she's had a very successful career outside the home. Even when we met, you know, she was much more successful than I was early on in our lives. And together and never even imagined at the time that we were going to get married, have kids, and she would eventually choose to stay home for a significant period of time to get our kids through the first early childhood development years, which we feel and still believe are the most important ones. And then transitioning back into the workforce later with me or with one of our portfolio companies or back in her industry, which is the IT industry. And so we have our, ups and downs around it all the time, even to this day. But it's a joy to work together. And now I will say one other thing about managing your, let's say, your mind and your time. You brought up, that escape of Call of Duty or you going and doing something like cooking to get away from it. There's a guy out of Harvard named Tony Schwartz that does this project called the Energy Project, and it was life-changing for me when I stopped managing my time and started managing my energy. And when you think about it, when you start to understand your own mental and physical constraints and rhythms in a day, you can accomplish so much more in such less time in a more, let's say, in a more joyful way. So for example, I know that my most creative time of the day is usually in the early mornings, somewhere about 30 to 45 minutes after I wake up. And then it's like anything, it's fleeting. It's maybe a 2 to 2.5 hour period of time. And in that period of time, I can create, I can write, I can do very strategic thinking. I get these amazing moments of clarity. I'm on my second cup of tea and everything's great.
Yeah.
And that's my moment of the day for doing those things, right? My wife is very much the opposite. She likes to sleep in. She's much more of a later in the day person. But we all have those moments where we can manage energy. Tony's the guy that created the whole sleep pod movement at Google and, changed productivity in workplaces around people starting to understand their energy. But I can tell you what I've learned from it the most is that I call it the do less than obsess behavior. So do these 90-minute sprints that are really intense and then take 20 minutes or 30 minutes and get out. And like you said, go for a run, take the dog out, get on the treadmill or the Peloton or whatever you need to do, or go do your Call of Duty thing, right? Or go watch a Food Network show or read some recipes or whatever the hell you need to do. But figure out that rhythm throughout your day where your energy needs to be managed, and then plan your work and productivity around it. And I think overall people will be happier.
That's so true.
And that's hard to figure out too, because I feel like since, we're in the midst of COVID right now, and I think a lot of routines have changed, but I think we've kind of discovered a different routine and trying different things out. And, in the mornings we used to sit around and have coffee together and like talk and chat. But we've slowly shifted courses there. And I come down here and I drink coffee and I started journaling and I started reading all these different books about, what's it called? What's his name? Ryan Holiday. I've been reading his books.
I love Ryan. I've shared the stage with Ryan on a few occasions. The Obstacle Away is a great book. I read the Daily Stoic almost every day. Same. I only have a couple of daily newsletters that I read. His is one. Shane Parrish's Brain Food is another one.
The Daily
really
Stoic's
focused
great.
Really focused on just general mental models and things of the way that we think and act and behave in the world. And he interviews a lot of really, really cool people. But Stoic is definitely one of my faves.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I like it because a lot of different stories from different people and how they, work through different times. And, if this is what works for you, I think that's good. And Erin has a different system than I do. Erin's, she likes to casually do things throughout the day, but she doesn't like the stop doing stuff. She's always about doing. And I'm more like, I'm going to do and I'm going to relax and I'm going to do and I'm going to
Michael's the
relax.
master of breaks, but I'm working on it. It's funny. Like he found Ryan Holiday. I'm reading other books, but they all overlap, and the stillness in the morning and kind
It's
of
nice.
doing less and accomplishing more and optimizing your routine. I think quarantine has allowed me to learn a lot and optimize better. So it's been really good.
Agreed. We're all in a moment of self-reflection. We have time. We have a different kind of time on our hands than we've had before. And those of us that choose to do something great with it are going to be part of the leaders of this recovery. And the ones that don't, I mean, they don't. But I would argue that that's probably their standard behavior anyway.
Yeah. There was definitely like a weird transition. I was telling Aaron last night that like of 2 weeks where I think we were just kind of like unsure what was happening, and we were getting takeout all the time. It was like this weird, like, what's really happening? They were like, okay, this is actually going to be here for a while. So let's make a new routine because we can't keep eating pizza every single night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Believe me, I hear you. But the quarantinis are nice.
Yeah. Do you want to ask the question before we wrap up?
Yeah. I mean, I could talk longer. Yeah. You guys, you're great, Sean. But we do like to always ask all of our guests two-part question, because our podcast is called Call Me Crazy. So we want to hear your Call Me Crazy story when in your history, maybe your friends or family might have thought a decision you made was a little weird, but you went ahead and did it anyway. And then the second part is what we can leave our listeners with if someone's starting their own business or thinking about starting their own business. What tips or takeaways do you have for those new entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I loved your title because I've always said entrepreneur is just a French word for crazy fucker.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
So that's good. Look, I've spent my life being doubted by conventional wisdom. You know, conventional wisdom yields conventional results. That's not who I am. I didn't get to 1% by thinking like the 99. And I actually, the one tip I will give everybody who wants to be an entrepreneur, you either are or you aren't. I think it's in your DNA. It called me. I didn't call it. So if you don't want to be successful, listen to your friends and family. Start with that. And then secondly, only surround yourself with people who give you energy and want what's best for you. And I know that's really, really hard because I have my own personal story. I'm estranged from the overwhelming majority of my family because of those very things. But I'm at peace with it because I know it was them and it wasn't me. And it's just quote unquote not a fit for me in my life to have people who take. There's this wonderful book by Adam Grant out of Wharton Business School called Give and Take. I highly suggest it to anyone.
Great podcast too.
Yes, and he classifies people across 3 different areas: givers, takers, and matchers. And he recognizes that in any organization, the top 10 percentile and the bottom 10 percentile are all givers. And how is that possible? Well, because the givers at the top recognize takers and they cut them off. The givers at the bottom do not recognize takers, and they're manipulated throughout their entire life by those takers they're taken from. And the thing with the takers is they are manipulators. They're masters at presenting themselves as givers and matchers when they're really just takers. So it's a great book for people who are trying to figure out how to remove takers from their life. But I can tell you, if you trust your gut and if it feels like someone's taking from you, they are. And so you need to be okay with it yourself. You need to remove the self-doubt and trust your gut and go in the direction consciously that you feel is best for you and the people you're responsible for. And so that's the advice I would give. But in terms of which one where I was told I was crazy and it wouldn't work and it didn't happen and all that stuff, gosh,
sounds like you have a couple.
I have a shit ton of those stories. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is 3 companies I sold are all still exist and are still operational these years later. They're probably still